My name is Catherine. I've been a stay-at-home wife for 2 years now, with no kids yet.
It was love at first sight.
That's how our story began. Bob came on strong, and that's how our courtship started. I felt so happy to be loved. But it's funny how simple it is for a woman. Being loved makes you want to love back, and before you know it, the roles of affection reverse. Now I feel like I'm the one who loves my husband more. Not that Bob doesn't love me, but I definitely love him too much. Maybe he's picked up on that, because he acts like a certain amount of his whims will always be indulged. Some are cute, sure, but others make me think, isn't that a bit much? Yet, in the end, the one who falls in love loses, right? Because I can't help but forgive him. In the end, I always go along with his whims. But here I am, a homemaker by choice, so in a way, I'm free. I know that if I don't indulge him to a certain extent, Bob would be unhappy. Lately, every chance he gets, he wants to go to his parents' place. Originally, my in-laws' house was nearby, so I used to visit often. But to me, it was still someone else's home, and the presence of my MIL meant that I had to be extra mindful. I wish we could just relax together at home on our days off, but Bob seems to feel differently. Once, when I asked him, "Why have you started going to your parents' place so much?" he said, "What's the point in us both just hanging around the house? Going there is doing a good deed for them, you know? As well do some good for them, right?" was his reply. So, in his view, even spending a lazy day at home with me is a waste of time. The one good thing about his parents' place is that my MIL doesn't give me a hard time. She's pretty indifferent about my presence. So, it's easy in that sense, but the moment I open my mouth, it's always, "No grandchildren yet?" I really want to see my grandkids. That gets exhausting. In my heart, I'm like, well, if you let us have some time at home, maybe there'd be kids by now. But it doesn't matter since Bob isn't asking for that. It's not like he's cold to me or anything. It's just that having children isn't something I can do on my own, so I do wish he'd be a little more supportive. I wish you had been a bit more supportive about the kids. To which he replied, "Caring for your kids is part of being good to your parents, isn't it? Well, maybe you don't need that yet. If that's the case, could you ask Bob to talk to our folks back home?" It's hard for me to bring it up.
How would I know?
No matter what I say, Bob just doesn't seem to care, completely ignoring it. My life continued with me being rushed about having children. Gradually, the stress started to break my spirit. Bob seemed to lose interest in me over time, dismissing me casually, and of course, there was no more married life. Whenever he had free time, he'd go to his parents' house or to the golf course with his work buddies. It was like he couldn't see our life together at all. Now, I'm like a housekeeper, there to support my husband's life. Even when I ask for a bit of quality time together, I'm dismissed with, "Isn't it enough that I come home after work?" Sigh, what am I even here for? The situation just got worse, and even when I'd say, "I bought some clothes today," he'd snap back, "What? With my money? If you're buying clothes, then I guess I can buy whatever I want too, right?" I'm tired of arguing in anger. Our conversations dwindled, and that's the current state of our marriage. I make sure dinner is ready and the house is clean for when Bob comes home, but I wonder what he's dissatisfied with. Before I knew it, I found myself going to a certain place. One day, Bob stood before me like a statue and suddenly said, "I want a divorce." He had a smirk on his face. What is he thinking? You're not fun to be with, and my parents keep bugging me about having grandkids.
They're saying if we don't have them, we might as well get a divorce. You might think you're everything to me, but let's get a divorce.
He probably thinks I'd say no. Too bad for him. What? Fine. Here. This is the divorce paper. I had already picked up the divorce papers, so I handed them over immediately. Bob's face was a picture of surprise. What? A divorce? Why are you surprised? You're the one who wants a divorce, right? Perfect. I've reached my limit too. Nothing I do is right, and you complain about everything. Your parents might blame me for us not having kids, but it's not just my fault, right? We don't even have a sex life, so how could we? I let out all my frustrations, slammed down the divorce papers that I had already filled out on my part, and urged Bob to fill in his section. Rushed by me, Bob filled in the divorce papers and stamped them. Then, I took the divorce papers to the city hall and submitted them right away. Bob was flustered, but I couldn't care less. I had no idea why suddenly Bob brought up divorce, but I had been waiting for this moment for so long. When I returned home after submitting the papers, Bob said to me, "Why don't you leave? This is my house, after all." All his previous panic was nowhere to be seen. Bob looked at me with cold eyes, like he was a changed person. I replied to Bob even more coldly, "Forgot something? This condo is in my name, and I've been living here since before we were married. I bought this place with my own money when I was working, so I have no obligation to let you live here. I sold the condo after leaving the city hall, so you better pack up and leave soon." Bob turned pale as I spoke.
Huh? But I've been paying the rent, haven't I?
That was when we were married. But not anymore. Why don't you go back to your beloved parents' home? Goodbye.
Wait a minute. Half of your savings are mine, according to the division of assets. I know that. You've saved up almost $100,000, right?
That's when it clicked. I understood why Bob had suddenly brought up divorce. It was my savings he was after. It's a shame, but you're wrong. That money was saved up before I got married, so I don't need to split it with you, I told him, and he just looked dumbfounded. I knew he didn't quite understand as I quickly packed my things and left the house. I didn't need the furniture or anything else. I went back to my parents' house and reported that I was divorced. But since my sister's family was also living there, I didn't stay with them. With the money from selling the condo and my savings, I rented an apartment. I started living on my own in a town not too far from my parents' house. After a long time, I was living by myself again. I also started looking for a new job and got re-employed. I was leading a fulfilling life. Getting divorced without any alimony or anything was incredibly easy. I've been living a hassle-free and graceful life. Out of the blue, I got a message from Bob after several months. "Hey, come back. I can't stand living at my parents' place anymore," he said with heightened emotion. I was like, "Even though you loved your parents' place so much, why?" While I was watching a movie, sipping a beer, and replied nonchalantly. According to him, even after getting divorced, he was being rushed into remarriage, with days daily demands to show us your grandkids already. It seems his in-laws were desperate for a grandchild. They didn't care who the bride was. He also mentioned that his MIL was in a rush because all her friends had grandchildren. I just said, "Oh, really? Good luck with that," and hung up the phone. Bob kept in touch now and then. Apparently, he got engaged to a woman a decade his senior living nearby after being set up by their families. And now, both families are pressuring them to have kids right away. He still says, "Let's get back together," but as far as I'm concerned, it's his own doing. "If I come back, it'll be me having kids with you, just like you wanted," he says. I don't even know what he's on about. When I was the one being rushed and having a hard time, he turned a blind eye, so I certainly don't want to hear such talk. Well, isn't that great for you? You were the one who kept saying how nice it would be to do a good deed for your parents by having kids. Isn't it about time you got to do that? The reason you divorced me was because I wouldn't have kids, right? Maybe it's better if you're forced to have them? Ah, this beer tastes great today.
Listen to me seriously. I didn't mean it like like that. I wanted to have them in the right order with you, he protested. You agreed to the divorce so easily. I just wanted to be on top. He came up with excuses. So I replied, this beer's gone bad because of you. I'm hanging up. Bob was ranting on the other end, but I hung up and blocked his number.
He probably thought he could make me bend to his whim this time, too, since I had in the past. The following year, I got a call from, well, my former MIL, who said it turned out Bob was the one with fertility issues, and the engagement with the older woman was off. Furthermore, he had secretly incurred debts that had ballooned to an unmanageable amount. Then, even my former MIL was like, please, marry Bob, so I said, I'm not about to marry into a family looking for a cash grab. You'd be better off job hunting than contacting me. When the MIL started to cry, I quickly hung up and blocked both her and my former FIL's numbers. 2 years later, I remarried someone I met at work. My new in-laws are both kind and warm-hearted people, and I'm living stress-free. Perhaps because of that, we were blessed with a child soon after the wedding, and now we are a happy family of 3. I plan to continue living an independent life so that this happiness lasts.